We're optimizing our human capital for a more agile future. Those were the words. Not you're fired. Not we're letting you go. It was a line scrubbed clean of humanity, delivered from a PowerPoint slide that had probably been workshopped for 3 weeks. They thought firing me would be the end of the story. They were wrong. My name is Leonard Kowalski. I'm 54 years old, and for 22 of those years, I was the director of logistics for Sterling Transport. In reality, I was the guy who built the entire dedicated freight division from a single truck and a handshake deal into a $67 million a year operation. The man delivering the news was Bryce Sterling, the 28-year-old nephew of the company's founder. He wore a Brioni suit that cost more than my first car and a smug certainty that only an MBA from Wharton and a total absence of real-world experience can provide. He sat across the polished mahogany table in Conference Room 3, the one with the view of the industrial park I'd helped fill. Beside him, a woman from HR, maybe 25 years old, stared intently at a blank notepad, refusing to make eye contact. Her name was Jessica. I remembered hiring her uncle as a driver 6 years ago. Bryce continued his pre-rehearsed speech. As we pivot towards a more data-driven, synergistic paradigm, we've decided that leadership needs to reflect that new direction. Your contributions have been foundational, but the industry is changing. I didn't say a word. I just watched him. My hands were flat on the table. My breathing was steady. 22 years of solving problems at 3 a.m. on a Sunday morning, of rerouting trucks through blizzards in Wyoming, of knowing the names of every shipping manager's kids, and it was all being erased by corporate buzzwords. Foundational. That's what you call the concrete you pour over and forget. If you appreciate stories about competence, triumphing over arrogance, about the quiet guys in the back room getting their due, then hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. We post stories like this all the time, showing what happens when a long-ignored expert finally decides the game is over. Make sure you hit that notification bell so you don't miss the next one. 2 days before the humiliation, Bryce had called a divisional meeting. He stood before a massive touchscreen, tapping through slides filled with charts and meaningless KPIs. He talked about leveraging our vertical integrations and disrupting legacy frameworks. I'd sat in the back, listening to him describe the business I had built as if he'd discovered it in an archaeological dig. He pointed to a list of our top 23 clients. These relationships, he announced, his voice booming with unearned authority, are the company's most valuable assets, and I will be personally taking the lead on managing them going forward to ensure a seamless transition into our new operational model. He had no idea how right and how catastrophically wrong he was. He saw names on a list: Global Petrochem, Agricorp Midwest, Precision Medical Devices. He saw them as company assets, like a forklift or a loading dock. What Bryce, in his Ivy League brilliance, failed to understand was that those relationships weren't just entries in a CRM database. They were covenants. They were promises I had personally made and kept for 2 decades. And most importantly, they were codified in Section 8, Subsection C of every single contract I had ever negotiated. The breaking point came in February 2020. Arthur Sterling, the founder and my mentor, had been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. He was 74, tough as iron, but he knew his time was limited. He'd started Sterling Transport in 1978 with a single flatbed and an almost religious belief in a man's word being his bond. I joined him in 1998. The company had a dozen trucks then, mostly doing regional LTL freight. I came from the Navy, where I'd spent 12 years as a logistics specialist. I knew how to move things from point A to point B efficiently, under pressure, with no excuses. Arthur saw something in me. He gave me a corner of the office, a phone, and a simple directive. Build us something that lasts, Lenny. So I did. I started with one client, a local machine shop that needed parts delivered on a strict just-in-time schedule. I didn't just set up the route, I drove it myself for the first month in our oldest Kenworth to understand every single bottleneck. I learned the receiving manager's name was Dave, that he hated paperwork before his second cup of coffee, and that his daughter played softball on Tuesdays. When a supplier was late, I didn't send an email. I got in my personal pickup truck, a 1985 Ford F-150 that I still own, and drove 200 miles to get the parts myself, delivering them at 10 p.m. so his production line wouldn't shut down. That's how it started. Dave at the machine shop told a friend at a plastics company. That friend told their contact at a food distributor. Word of mouth. Trust. It was slow, patient work. It meant Christmases interrupted by calls about a jackknifed rig in Ohio. It meant missing my son's fourth grade graduation play because a shipment of critical server components for a data center had to be rerouted around a flood in Missouri. I didn't just manage logistics. I absorbed my clients' problems and made them my own. My wife, Sarah, understood. She called it my logistics priesthood. By 2013, we had 23 dedicated national contracts. These weren't just shipping agreements. They were deeply integrated partnerships. We handled 100% of the outbound freight for Agricorp Midwest. We were the sole carrier for Precision Medical's sterile surgical kits, a job with zero margin for error. Those contracts represented $67 million in annual revenue, which was 82% of Sterling Transport's total income. The rest of the company, the old LTL division, barely broke even. My division was the company. Arthur knew this. As his health failed, he started bringing Bryce around, his sister's boy. Bryce had never changed a tire, never filled out a bill of lading, never spoken to an angry dock foreman at midnight. He walked through the dispatch office like he was touring a museum of ancient history. He'd look at the massive whiteboard where we tracked every truck in real time and say things like, "There's an app for this, you know?" He couldn't grasp that the board wasn't just data. It was a living thing, understood at a glance by men and women with 20 years of experience in their guts. He saw inefficiency. We saw a system honed by a million real-world problems. One evening, about 6 months before he passed, Arthur called me to his house. We sat on his back porch, drinking bourbon. He was thin. His voice was weak, but his eyes were as sharp as ever. "Lenny," he said, looking out at the sunset, "I'm leaving the company in a trust, but my sister is the executor. That means Bryce is going to be in charge. The boy's got a good education, but he's a fool. He thinks business is a series of transactions. He doesn't understand it's about relationships." He paused, taking a slow sip. "He's going to come for you," Arthur said, his voice flat. "He'll see your salary. He'll see the loyalty you command, and he'll see it as a threat to his authority, not as an asset. He'll think he can just inherit the relationships you built. He'll think he can replace you with a piece of software." Then he gave me the weapon. "I had my lawyer, Marcus Thorne, review all your contracts last week," Arthur continued. "They're solid, but they're built on trust. We need to put some iron in them. Marcus has an idea. A key personnel clause. It's common in tech, in consulting. It designates a specific individual as essential to the performance of the contract. If that person is terminated or reassigned without the client's consent, the client has the right to terminate the agreement, penalty-free, with 30 days' notice." A week later, I met with Marcus. He was a small, precise man in his late 60s with a mind like a steel trap. He had drafted a standard addendum. Section 8, Subsection C. It named me, Leonard Kowalski, as the designated relationship manager and senior logistics coordinator. It stipulated that my removal from this role constituted a material breach of the agreement. Over the next 3 months, as each of the 23 contracts came up for their annual renewal, I presented the addendum. I was honest about it. I explained that with Arthur's health declining, this clause provided them with stability and an assurance of continued service levels. It protected them. If the company's service ever faltered because of a leadership change, they had an immediate, clean exit. Not a single one of them hesitated. They weren't signing a contract with Sterling Transport. They were signing a contract with me. The paperwork was filed. Copies went into our corporate records. My personal notarized copies went into a fireproof safe in my basement. Arthur passed away that spring. Bryce took over as CEO the following Monday. His first act was to replace the old coffee machines with a fancy espresso maker that no one knew how to use. His second was to hire a consulting firm to reevaluate corporate culture. Now, sitting in that conference room, my employment being optimized, I felt a dead calm settle over me. Bryce was finishing his speech, a faint, triumphant smirk on his face. He thought he'd just cut a major salary from the books and consolidated his power. He thought he'd won. Security will escort you to your office to collect your personal belongings, he said, the final, sterile insult. We'll mail you the details of your severance package. I stood up. The HR representative, Jessica, finally looked at me. Her expression was a mixture of pity and fear. I looked past her, directly at Bryce. My voice was steady, measured. I do not accept the decision to terminate my employment. Bryce laughed, a short, sharp bark. Accept it? You don't have a choice, Leonard. This isn't a negotiation. It's a notification. Oh, I understand that, I said. I'm just making a formal statement for the record. You are terminating me, Leonard Kowalski, effective immediately. Is that correct? Yes, he said, his patience wearing thin. That's correct. Now, if you'll excuse us... Thank you, I said. That's all I needed. I turned and walked out of the room. I didn't wait for security. 2 guards met me in the hallway, looking profoundly uncomfortable. One of them, a big man named Frank, I'd helped get a loan for his daughter's braces a few years back. He just nodded at me, a silent apology in his eyes. They walked me to my office. I didn't take much. A photo of Sarah and my son, Michael. A small model of a Navy supply ship. My worn leather briefcase. As I was putting the photo in my briefcase, I saw Bryce strutting past my open door, talking loudly on his phone. The first step in trimming the fat is complete, he said. Now the real growth begins. I walked out of that building for the last time, got into my F-150, and drove home. The first thing I did was call Sarah. I told her what happened. She wasn't surprised. So, it's time? She asked. It's time, I replied. The second thing I did was go down to the basement, open the safe, and pull out the binder containing the 23 contracts. I laid them out on the dining room table. Section 8, Subsection C, the Ironclad Guarantee. My plan was simple. I wouldn't fight for my job. I wouldn't sue for wrongful termination, even though I probably could have. That would be playing on Bryce's field, a world of lawyers and billable hours. My field was logistics. It was about cause and effect, action and reaction. Bryce had just set a cause in motion. He was about to experience the effect. I spent the next 2 days on the phone. I didn't call lawyers, I called my clients. I started with John Carter at Precision Medical Devices. John was a former Army quartermaster. We spoke the same language. John, it's Leonard Kowalski. Lenny, how are you? Did that shipment of pre-filled syringes make it to the Dallas facility ahead of the storm? It did, I said. Arrived yesterday at 1400 hours. But that's not why I'm calling. I need to inform you, as a professional courtesy, that as of 2 hours ago, my employment with Sterling Transport has been terminated. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. You're kidding me, John finally said. They fired you? Who's they? The new CEO, Arthur's nephew. The kid in the shiny suit? I met him once. He talked for 10 minutes and didn't say a single thing of substance. What happened? They're optimizing, I said, letting the word hang in the air. John cursed, a string of creative phrases I hadn't heard since my Navy days. So what does that mean for us, Lenny? You're the only one who understands our cold chain requirements. Our entire distribution network for the Western U.S. is built on the system you designed. That's between you and Sterling Transport, John, I said calmly. I'm just letting you know that I'm no longer there to manage it. However, you might want to have your legal team look at Section 8C of our current agreement. It was put there for this exact kind of situation. Another pause. I could hear him rustling papers. Key personnel, he read aloud. I'll be damned. Arthur was a smart man. He was, I agreed. So, what are you going to do now, Lenny? He asked. I'm opening my own consulting firm, I said. Kowalski Logistics Solutions. Just me, for now. Helping companies streamline their shipping operations. Consider yourself retained, John said without a moment's hesitation. Send me a proposal. In the meantime, I'm having our lawyers draft a termination notice for Sterling. 30 days. This is unbelievable. It was the same conversation, with minor variations, 22 more times. Susan at AgriCorp Midwest, who I'd helped coordinate emergency grain shipments during a drought. Frank at Global Petrochem, whose hazardous materials protocols I had personally rewritten after a near disaster. Each one reacted with a combination of shock, anger, and immediate loyalty. They weren't loyal to the Sterling Transport logo on the side of the truck. They were loyal to the man who made sure the truck showed up, no matter what. Meanwhile, back at Sterling, Bryce was living in a fool's paradise. He sent out a company-wide email announcing my retirement, wishing me well in my future endeavors. He then sent a separate email to my client list, introducing himself as their new senior executive liaison. He promised a new era of data-driven efficiency. The first sign of trouble hit him 3 days after I was fired. A key shipment for an auto parts manufacturer heading to a plant in Michigan was delayed by a documentation error at a weigh station in Indiana. It was a simple fix, a matter of knowing which customs code to use. The driver called dispatch. Dispatch had no idea. The problem was escalated. Normally, the call would have come to my cell phone, day or night. I would have solved it in 5 minutes. Instead, the call went to Bryce. He tried to handle it. He told the driver to interface with the relevant authorities. He told the dispatch manager to consult the operational playbook. There was no playbook. The playbook was in my head. The truck sat at the weigh station for 16 hours. The auto plant's assembly line had to shut down for a full shift, at a cost of $50,000 per hour. The client was furious. Bryce tried to smooth it over. He offered a discount on future shipments. He promised to personally investigate the breakdown in protocol. What he didn't understand was that there was no protocol to break down. There was just me, and I was gone. Then the letters started arriving, by courier, by registered mail. Formal, legally binding notices of contract termination, effective in 30 days, citing Section 8, Subsection C. The first one was from Precision Medical. Bryce probably dismissed it as a one-off, an angry client. Then the second arrived, from AgriCorp. Then the third. By the end of the week, 7 letters were on his desk. By the middle of the following week, the count was up to 17. The panic must have been setting in. $67 million in annual revenue. 82% of the company. It wasn't just leaking, it was hemorrhaging. The CFO, a nervous man named Bill, would have been in Bryce's office every hour, his face getting paler each time. The trucks, the company's primary assets, were about to have nothing to carry. The emergency board meeting was called for a Friday, 2.5 weeks after my termination. I knew about it because Marcus Thorne, who still sat on the board as a favor to the late Arthur, called me the night before. Leonard, he said, the boy is in full meltdown. He's blaming you. He's blaming the clients. He's blaming outdated systems. He has no idea that he's the author of his own destruction. The board is terrified. They want to know if there's any way to salvage this. I told them I might have a solution. I'd like you to be there tomorrow. Not in the meeting at first, but be in the building. Be ready. I arrived the next morning at 9:45 a.m. for the 10 a.m. meeting. I wasn't wearing a suit. I wore a crisp button-down shirt, clean jeans, and my work boots. I wasn't there as an executive. I was there as a logistician. I was there as the solution to a problem. Marcus met me in the lobby and led me to a small, empty office down the hall from the main boardroom. "Wait here," he said. "The fireworks are about to begin." Through the door, I could hear the murmur of voices from the boardroom. Then Bryce's voice, loud and strained. He was trying to project confidence, but the fear was evident. He was talking about a coordinated, bad faith action by a disgruntled former employee. He was talking about predatory poaching. He was threatening legal action against me. Inside the boardroom, as Marcus later recounted, Bryce was presenting a slide deck titled Navigating Headwinds, a forward-looking strategy. It was filled with more corporate jargon, more baseless optimism. He proposed launching a new marketing initiative and investing in a best-in-class logistics software suite to win back the clients. The board members, all old friends of Arthur's, were not impressed. One of them, a plain-spoken manufacturing magnate named George, finally cut him off. "Son, we're about to lose nearly the entire company. We don't need a marketing plan. We need a miracle. Do you have any idea why 23 of our most loyal clients are all walking out the door at the exact same time?" "It's Kowalski," Bryce spat. "He's poisoned them against us." That's when Marcus Thorne cleared his throat. "Actually," he said, his voice calm and precise, "it's not Leonard. It's the contract. It's Section 8, Subsection C. A clause you would have been aware of if you'd ever bothered to read the agreements that form the basis of our entire revenue stream." Marcus then distributed copies of one of the contracts, with the key personnel clause highlighted. A heavy silence fell over the room as they read it. The truth was sinking in. This wasn't a betrayal by a rogue employee. This was a catastrophic, self-inflicted wound. "The clients aren't leaving because of Leonard," Marcus continued. "They're leaving because you unilaterally removed the one person their contracts designated as essential to the service they were paying for. You gave them the legal right to walk away, and they have all chosen to exercise that right." Bryce's face, Marcus told me, had gone completely white. He was stammering. But he's just one man. We're a corporation. The relationships are with the company." "No," Bryce George, the board member, said, his voice laced with contempt. "The relationship was with Lenny. We just owned the trucks, and it was your job to know that." "There is, however, a potential solution," Marcus announced to the room. "The clients have all indicated they are moving their business to a new logistics consulting firm. A firm that has the expertise and the relationships to ensure their operations continue without interruption." "Who?" Bryce asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Who are they going to?" On cue, Marcus stood up, walked to the boardroom door, and opened it. He looked at me and nodded. "Gentlemen," he said to the board, "allow me to introduce the founder and CEO of Kowalski Logistics Solutions." I walked into the room. I made eye contact with each board member. They looked relieved. Then I looked at Bryce. The arrogant smirk was gone, replaced by a look of pure, uncomprehending horror. He looked like a man who had just seen a ghost. I took a seat at the table, placing my leather briefcase in front of me. I didn't say anything. I just waited. The power in the room had shifted so completely it was almost a physical force. "What is this?" Bryce finally managed to choke out. "This is a setup." "This," I said, my voice quiet but carrying across the table, "is the consequence of your decision. You terminated my employment. You did not, however, terminate my relationships. Those clients need their goods moved. Their supply chains are the lifeblood of their businesses. They have retained my new firm to manage that for them." "You can't do that!" he shrieked. "You're stealing our clients. Your clients terminated their contracts with you, In accordance with the terms you failed to read, Marcus interjected smoothly. What they do now is their business, and their business is now with Mr. Kowalski. I opened my briefcase and took out a single folder. I slid it across the table to George. Sterling Transport is now a company with significant assets, trucks, warehouses, a skilled team of drivers and dispatchers, but no customers. It is, for all intents and purposes, insolvent. My clients, however, still need those assets to move their freight. So, I am here to make an offer. George opened the folder. His eyebrows shot up. I am offering to acquire the assets of Sterling Transport's dedicated freight division, I stated. The trucks, the trailers, the client service records, and I will offer employment to all the drivers and operational staff. I'm prepared to pay a fair price. I paused. I'm offering the exact amount of the severance package you promised me, but never sent. $285,000. It was a brutal, elegant solution. I was buying the company I had built with the money they owed me for firing me from it. Bryce was on his feet, sputtering, his face red. This is insane. The assets are worth millions. Assets without revenue are just liabilities, son, George said, not even looking at him. He looked around the table at the other board members. All in favor of accepting Mr. Kowalski's offer and appointing Marcus Thorne as interim CEO to oversee the transition. Every hand went up, except for Bryce's, and all in favor of terminating the employment of Bryce Sterling, effective immediately for cause due to gross negligence. Again, every hand went up. The gavel came down. It was over in less than 10 minutes. Bryce stood there, swaying slightly, his expensive suit suddenly looking like a cheap costume. Security was called. This time, it was for him. Frank, the same guard who had walked me out, now stood by the door, waiting for Bryce. Their eyes met for a moment. Frank's expression was pure, cold stone. The aftermath was swift and decisive. Bryce was escorted from the building, yelling about his lawyers, but there was nothing they could do. He hadn't just been outmaneuvered, he had been the architect of his own downfall. Arthur, in his wisdom, had put a clause in the family trust that Bryce's position as CEO and his access to the bulk of his inheritance were contingent on the company maintaining profitability. With the loss of 82% of its revenue, the company was anything but profitable. The trust's directors, at Marcus's recommendation, cut him off. The last I heard, Bryce Sterling was selling luxury automobiles at a BMW dealership in Scottsdale. He lost the penthouse, the fancy car, the whole lifestyle. He was forced to learn what it was like to actually work for a living, to earn a commission. He wasn't very good at it. Arrogance doesn't close a sale. The HR representative, Jessica, resigned a week later. She sent me a short, apologetic email. I didn't respond. The board members who had silently watched Bryce's rise were all replaced within 6 months by a new board I appointed myself. I took over the assets. I rehired every single driver, dispatcher, and mechanic I wanted. I gave them all a 10% raise. Our headquarters remained in the same building, but we now leased the space from what was left of Sterling Transport, a holding company that managed Arthur's remaining LTL assets, run by a competent manager who understood its modest place in the world. My new company, Kowalski Logistics, thrived. We didn't need a marketing department or a fancy software suite. We had something better, a 22-year reputation for flawless execution and absolute reliability. Within a year, we had not only retained all 23 of our original clients, but had added 6 more, purely through word of mouth. I'm still 54 years old. I still drive my 1985 F-150 to work every day. But now, when I walk into the office, it's my name on the door. I'm home for dinner every night at 6. I attend every one of my son Michael's college baseball games. Last month, Sarah and I took that trip to Italy we'd been putting off for 15 years. Sometimes I think about Bryce and his buzzwords. Optimizing human capital. He thought he was cutting a cost. He never understood that what he was really doing was removing the single most critical component of his entire machine. He thought business was about assets on a spreadsheet. I know it's about trust, built one late-night phone call, one impossible delivery, one kept promise at a time. Your value doesn't disappear just because an arrogant fool is incapable of seeing it. Sometimes you just have to take it somewhere it will be appreciated. Thanks for watching. If you have a story about getting the last laugh on a terrible boss, share it in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next video.